lot of people don't know this, but dreaming is actually taking your emotions and processing them while dreaming. Our mind's eye doesn't know what to do with that information, so it kind of comes up with this fantastical thing called a dream. But this is really where emotional processing goes on. So when we wake somebody up in the middle, emotional processing stops. And that's why they keep having the dream over and over, because their brain hasn't gotten through the emotional processing part, because it keeps waking up because it gets scared.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it is my pleasure to have Dr. Michael Breus back with us again. His first appearance was on the show in 2016, episode 58. He is the sleep doctor. He is an amazing human as well. Let me just go through his incredible bio here. Michael is a double board certified clinical psychologist and clinical sleep specialist. He's one of only 168 psychologists in the world to have taken and passed the sleep medicine boards without going to medical school. Michael is the author of 4 books, with his newest book being Energize. He's also the author of The Power of When, which is a fantastic book all about chronotypes that it was just hugely beneficial to me. Michael gives the reader in that book the exact time to do things like run, have sex, eat, buy things, sell, ask a boss for a raise, everything else. And it's based on research. He's an incredible thinker, as well as mastermind together called M.E.T.A.L that you might have heard me talk about before. So we're M.E.T.A.L brothers, and he's been on over 300 interviews, and some of his more famous interviews have included Oprah, Dr. Oz, The Doctors, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And he was also named as the top sleep doctor of Los Angeles by Reader's Digest. Michael, it's so great to have you back.
It's always great to be here, dude. I'm so excited.
I am too. And yeah, I love talking with you, and you're just such an amazing person. You really do care a lot about people. It comes through. It's really nice to be in your company. So let's talk first of all about your newest book, Energize. What inspired you to write that one, and kind of give us the origin story and the purpose of that.
You bet. So first of all, as always, thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoy you. I enjoy your company, and I certainly enjoy your audience. What a great group of people to just kind of learn more about optimization. So yeah, my 4th book is called Energize, and I have a co-author, Miss Stacey Griffith. Stacey is one of the founding trainers for a company called SoulCycle. That's the indoor bicycle company that is all around the country. And I brought her on as a movement specialist, because one of the reasons that we find that people report having low energy is because they're not moving a whole lot. And the origin of the book actually came from my relationship with Stacey. And so Stacey and I have been friends for a long time, and she was helping me out with my movement, and I was helping her out with her sleep. She turned to me one day and she was like, my clients, all they ever tell me is they're freaking exhausted. And I said, my clients say the same thing. And so I said to her, do your clients sleep well? And she said to me, do your clients move well? And we both looked at each other and we're like, I think we're missing something here. And so we said, what if we created a sleep and movement program that could help people feel more energetic during the daytime? And we started to look at the data, and there was a lot of data to suggest that, number one, sedentary lifestyle lowers the perceived energy level of people. So people, when they sit a lot, they don't feel like they move a lot. Surprise, surprise. They're not motivated to do a whole lot when they're sitting all day long. Whereas when we get them up and moving, and to be clear, this is not an exercise program. This is a movement program. As I'm getting older, I'm going to be 55 this year. I'm noticing that my mobility is changed quite a bit, and that's super duper important as we get older, as has my strength and the different types of exercises that I needed to do. Stacey has taught me a tremendous amount about how much cardio do I need as a 55-year-old male. And, because I was doing hours of it, like 90 minutes of cardio. And that turns out to not be the greatest idea in the universe. Really, moderation is important. But again, mobility is as important as movement itself. We also added intermittent fasting as the 3rd component, because at the end of the day, you got to eat, you got to sleep, and you got to move in order to feel a level of energy. And so, fuel was something that we wanted to look at. And to be fair, there are a lot of diet books out there, Stephan. I mean, a lot. And I'm not a nutritionist, and Stacey's not a nutritionist either. And so we decided to look at the use of a tool called intermittent fasting. Now, this is not a new tool. This has been around for a while, and there's some tremendous research looking at intermittent fasting. And one of the big things that many people report when they intermittent fast is they gain energy. They feel like more energetic throughout the day. Food isn't necessarily slowing them down. And so the book really is developed into three separate components. There's the intermittent fasting, there's sleep, and then there's movement. Well, what we did to make it all kind of come together was we discovered that body type plays a big role. Now, I'll be very fair. This wasn't my discovery. This was Stacey's. And so when I was talking to Stacey, I turned to her and I said, well, what kind of movement should I have my clients do? Like, because I'm not a movement expert. And she said, well, tell me more about your clients. And I said, oh, this person's a 47-year-old, Caucasian female. She's like, no. What's their height? What's their weight? What's their distribution of fat? Like, are they pear-shaped? Are they long and lean? And I said, oh, are you talking about those body types that we learned in like high school a million years ago, which were called endomorph, mesomorph, ectomorph? So she was like, yeah, I guess I am. And so what we discovered in looking into the research was you can actually learn when to intermittent fast based on your chronotype. That's your internal biological mechanism for when to go to sleep. And you can learn when to fast and how long to fast based on your body type. And then your body type tells you about which exercises for mobility are going to be best for you. So by understanding two metrics, which is chronotype and body type, we nail it and we can give people a very personalized methodology for maintaining energy 24/7. Well, not 24/7. We want them to sleep without caffeine.
One of the things that's in the book, if I'm not mistaken, is banana tea.
What he's referencing is one of my favorite recipes. And this is an easy way for you to increase levels of magnesium in your system. So one of the things that people come to me all the time and they say, Michael, what do I need to do? Is there an herb? Is there a supplement that I can do to give me better sleep, optimize my sleep, right? And so the very first thing I like to do is I take kind of a unique approach where I say, hey, do me a favor, go get some blood work done with your physician, and let's see if you're deficient in anything first. Before we start adding on ashwagandha and, passion flower and all these other things that your body doesn't necessarily need, let's make sure that the vitamins and the minerals that your body actually requires to do all the things it's supposed to do are up to the levels that we want them to be. Now, here's the truth of the matter. Most people are actually deficient in vitamin D and magnesium. Those are easy ones to identify, and it's a simple test from your doctor. Another big one besides vitamin D and magnesium, especially for women, is iron. If any one of those three are not where we want them to be in terms of normal ranges, that's when we see them affecting sleep. Now, the reason I'm giving you this long explanation is because banana tea fixes one of those three deficiencies, and that is in magnesium. So a lot of people don't know it, but bananas are loaded with magnesium. We call them nature's sleeping pills, believe it or not, because they have a lot of magnesium in them. But interestingly enough, the peel has 3 times the amount of magnesium as the fruit itself. Now, I know somebody out there is listening and they're saying to themselves, oh God, he's going to ask us to chop up the peel and eat the peel. No, I'm not. I promise you, I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is teach you about what I call banana tea. Now, I want to be clear, there's no actual tea in this recipe. So go out and get an organic banana and just wash it off. Make sure there's no dirt or pesticides or things like that on it. Cut off the tip and the stem, right? And cut it in half, but leave the peel on and the fruit in it. So all I've asked you to do is wash off the outside of a banana, cut off the top and the bottom and cut it in half. Take the 2 pieces and drop them into about 3 cups of boiling water. And it should take about 4 minutes, 5 minutes, or until the banana turns brown. Then what I want you to do is drink the water in like a 6 to 8 ounce cup. This is what I call banana tea. You can add a little bit of honey or a little bit of cinnamon to taste if you like it. As my daughter says, Dad, it's really banana-y. So you really have to like bananas in order to do this. But what's great about it is it comes with all of the natural phytosteroids that actually help absorb the magnesium better. And so this works in most of my patients, this works much better than actually magnesium supplementation. And it's kind of a nice ritual to be able to have at night before you go to bed. Now, You got to like bananas, of course. But other than that, it works out really, really well. And people seem to love it. I have one mom and she makes it at the beginning of the week and she pours it into popsicle molds and she gives it to her kids as treats during the summertime. They have no idea and they're out like a light.
Oh, that's ninja. I like that.
Yeah, it is ninja.
Well, that reminds me of something I heard that was just the strangest thing, and it made the most sense after I thought about it. And it's this: I met somebody who was allergic to bananas. Accidentally, he was given a banana once. It was organic, and he did not have a reaction to it.
Oh, so it's the pesticides probably.
Yes, and they make it through the peel.
Yeah, people don't understand like that level of, like what's going on with your fruit, especially fruits that you eat the skin. Apples are a great example. Like a lot of people are like, I don't even wash it off. Bad idea. Like it's worth 30 seconds to kind of scrub off the outside of the apple before you chomp on in, type of thing, and understand where your fruit is coming from. Of course, there are lots of different practices and things like that going on depending upon what you're looking for. But banana tea works great for sleep. Believe it or not, there are actually some foods that are really good in general for sleep. But as a general guideline, one of the things I tell people, and this falls suit with the Energize book as well, is you want to stop eating approximately 2 hours before lights out. So as an example, if you go to bed at 10, I don't want another morsel going into your mouth after 8 o'clock. This allows for enough time for the digestive process to occur. One of the things that happens if we go to bed with a full stomach, we really don't get great sleep, number one, because a lot of energy is actually diverted to the metabolic process. But more importantly, depending upon what you eat, you can end up with nightmares, right? Like if you have super spicy food before bed, it can come out in a dream, type of thing. So give yourself that 2 hours. And if you've given yourself that 2 hours, then you only have 10 hours of fasting to do. So the way we work it is we say, stop. Let's say your bedtime is 10, stop eating at 8, and then you can eat again at 8 the next morning. That would be considered an intermittent fast. That would be a 12-hour fast. Actually, that would be a 12-hour fast. So that would be a perfect place for somebody to start. 12 hours of food, 12 hours of fast. We don't really like people to jump on into the intermittent fasting program too quickly. Because some people say, I'll fast for 16 hours and only feed for 8, or I'll fast for 20 hours and only eat for 4. Slow your roll. This is a technique that your body has to get used to. And this is one of the ways that we, in the book, talk about when to do it. And so based on your body type, it can tell you how long you want to fast. As an example, if you're an ectomorph or a long and lean person with not a lot of body fat, you want a longer feeding time, like a 12-hour feeding time. If, however, you're a mesomorph, kind of in the middle muscular, you might want to lose a little bit of weight, but not a ton. Well, then you're going to have probably closer to a 16-hour feeding time. I'm sorry, less. Sorry, you would have a 8-hour feeding time. And then if you were an endomorph, which is kind of the bigger person, then you would actually want to fast for longer and feed for shorter. You might only feed for 8 hours. So you see what we do there is we go from 12 to 10 to 8 in terms of the amount of time of eating based on your body type. So again, ectomorph, long and lean, should feed for 12 hours. And mesomorph, kind of muscular, can feed for 10. And then endomorph, a little bit bigger, can feed for 8 as a good starting point for people. This way, people can start to understand a little bit more about how to schedule their day and how to make that kind of thing work. Now, if you layer on your chronotype, which we show you exactly how to do in the book, then you even know what time to go to bed. That just makes the whole thing work.
So what is your body type, your chronotype, and when do you, what's your eating window, and what's your bedtime?
I am a mesomorph wolf. So what does that mean? So I'm in the middle. I have, my shoulders are much bigger than my waist. And by the way, the easy way to tell which body type you are is if you take your thumb and your middle finger and you put it around your wrist like that. If it touches, you're a mesomorph. If it's got a space between it, you're an endomorph. And if the fingers overlap, you're an ectomorph. It's a very easy way to tell, just rudimentarily from a body marker. So I am a mesomorph, so in the middle, wolf, nighttime person. So I go to bed around 11, 12 o'clock at night. I get up around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I do not eat until almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Because everything is pushed late because I'm a late person, right? If you are, for example, a lion, which is somebody that likes to get up at like 4:30 in the morning, that's a whole different ball game, right? Then everything gets switched. You would actually eat earlier and you'd start your fast later.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get a little metaphysical here, because you mentioned nightmares a few minutes ago and how eating late can contribute to that. But there's I think, a metaphysical component to nightmares and a spiritual component. So I want to read a sentence, two sentences from a book called Practical Tanya, which is it's a Kabbalah book, Jewish mysticism. And this is a section about the meaning of your dreams. If your soul successfully reached the heavens when you were sleeping, your dreams would have a holy and pure content. Empty or negative dream content suggests that your soul was unable to ascend to heaven. Now, there's a whole lot of additional information about this, but the idea here is it's humbling to think that, okay, my soul doesn't ascend to the heavens at night. It's hanging around in the astral planes and doing all sorts of battling with demons and so forth. And I want to ascend to heaven. I want to get more higher up the ladder when I sleep.
100%. So here's how I would translate that on the sleep medicine side of things. So I agree. It makes intuitive sense that depending upon where your state is, both mentally and spiritually, when you go to bed, that will determine how you sleep, as well as your ability to get into certain stages of sleep. Right? So we know that we can dream in any stage of sleep, but the preponderance of dreaming occurs during REM sleep. This has a tendency to occur very small in the first part of the night and much larger in the latter part of the night. But one of the things that we know is it's much easier to fall asleep and you have more positive dreams if you are optimistic before bed. What does that mean? That means a gratitude list. That means, right, thinking through some of your issues and finding some solutions. It's not the big problem-solving time just before bed. I want to be very clear. That is a time for relaxation, for rest, and for maybe even scheduling in your mind the next day when to attack a problem. But the time right before bed, I consider it to be sacred. I don't know if that's the right word in the context of the question, but I take that time quite seriously as the best metaphor I can use is runway to land the plane, right? And so people have got to have some time. Like, sleep is not an on-off switch. It's really more like slowly pulling your foot off the gas and slowly putting your foot on the brake. You've got to give your body that wind down time in order to successfully not only enter sleep, but to achieve the type of sleep that you're looking for. So in this Kabbalah reference, here's what I would argue is by giving yourself a period of time before bed. And in the Jewish faith, if memory serves, there are some nighttime prayers that go on before bed. That is a time of relaxation, right? A time of meditation, a time of connection. Very different than any other time that you would have during the daytime, more than likely, unless you practice those methods during the daytime. And that, again, allows for this relaxation to occur and then the natural sleep process to take over and then bring you up into most likely those dreams. So I don't disagree at all. I think it's just an interesting translation of good sleep hygiene.
I'm curious to hear what your best dream is that you've ever had.
So great question. Dreams are an interest of mine for sure, but not something that I've studied too formally. So I want to be clear, I'm not a dream researcher, but I do know a lot about dreams. So I was very fortunate. I worked on a project where we were doing something called lucid dreaming. So for folks out there who may or may not know what lucid dreaming is when you gain consciousness inside of the dream and realize that you're dreaming. This is a real phenomenon, and believe it or not, it's a skill set. You can actually train yourself to do this. There was a very fun and famous movie called Inception that kind of played off of this. To be clear, it's not the same thing, but it kind of plays off the idea of waking up inside of your own dream. Now, those dreams are very fun. They are my favorites for sure. And fascinatingly enough, when you survey people to find out because there's categories of those dreams that people have, there's two that every single person seems to have. Doesn't matter who they are. Flying and becoming intimate with somebody that's very, very attractive, like a supermodel. Those are the two big things, and it's very, very realistic. So those are easily some of my more fun dreams. I certainly like the flying dream quite a lot. But what's interesting about lucid dreams and something called dream therapy, I want to be clear here, dream therapy is not dream interpretation, right? So many people think, oh, I write down my dream or I talk about my dream and it means something. I want to be very, very clear. Nobody really truly understands the meaning of dreams generally across the board. Dreams are very specific. Dreams are very personal. You are the best person to understand what your dream means. However, there is a whole area of study in psychology called dream therapy. These are actually 4-year trained Jungian psychologists who have spent years looking at and understanding what happens during a dream. So I have a friend who actually is a dream therapist, and she sort of walked me through what she does with clients. It is fascinating. And also, and following along the whole idea of becoming optimized, if you are suffering from significant bad dreams, nightmares, night terrors, listen up, because this is something that can be very, very helpful in those areas. By the way, you can also use dream therapy to create positive dreams for yourself and aspirational dreams for yourself, which again, very interesting. But here's what happens is you go into a therapeutic setting like an office, and then the therapist will create a very safe space, you understanding what's going to go on here. And then you go into not a hypnotic trance, but you go into a very relaxed state. And then the therapist starts saying, bring back all of the details of this nightmare that's been happening for you. And so you start to bring up that there was an attacker, and here's the room, and here's the colors in the room, and here's the furniture in the room. And it gets very, very real, very, very quickly. The person's eyes are closed, so they're imagining this in their sort of mind's eye. One of the things that people don't know about nightmares is nightmare is defined by somebody waking up out of a scary dream. The awakening seems to be one of the big problems. What we've recently discovered is the awakening stops the progress of the dream. A lot of people don't know this, but dreaming is actually you're taking your emotions and processing them while dreaming. Our mind's eye doesn't know what to do with that information, so it kind of comes up with this fantastical thing called a dream. But this is really where emotional processing goes on. So when we wake somebody up in the middle, emotional processing stops. And that's why they keep having the dream over and over, because their brain hasn't gotten through the emotional processing part, because it keeps waking up because it gets scared. So when you sit somebody in the situation in a safe space and you basically turn to them and say, push play, you're safe, and you let them talk through what's going, because they already know what's going to happen in the dream. They don't realize that they do, but it's in their unconscious. And once you allow that to come through in the therapeutic session, they start to process the dream. Then the frequency of these nightmares begins to reduce. And then within usually 7 to 21 days, it's gone. It's amazing.
Okay, interesting. Well, I've got a different angle to explore in this whole dream meaning side of things, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. I wanted to ask you a few more questions related to like lucid dreaming and so forth. So have you done a lot of lucid dreaming? From what I understand, by the way, I interviewed Charlie Morley, who's a world expert on lucid dreaming. That's a great interview. So one of my understandings of lucid dreaming is that once you've tested yourself to make sure you're awake, or I mean, still like you're conscious in the dream and you're still in the dream. Like, for example, I learned that you can hold your nose and you try to breathe in. And if you can still breathe in, you're in the dream.
You're in the dream. That's right. Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways that you can identify that you're in the dream. Clocks that don't move. That's another big one. Something like holding your nose, but still being able to breathe. So you're not actually physically doing it. That's certainly another one as well. A big one is people will put a big X on the back of their hand and they look at it all day long. And when you look at it and there's no longer an X, you're dreaming.
That
so
requires
like
forethought. So like, okay, I'm going to be ready for my dream.
When you get into a habit of it, it's quite interesting. And again, it is definitely a skill set that you can acquire. So I worked with Dr. Stephan, who is he discovered lucid dreaming, and he's kind of the father of lucid dreaming. He's also like very out there in terms of his ideas and thoughts around dreams and dreaming. From a more of a scientific standpoint, we now have had at least 3 different laboratories develop entry processes to the lucid dream. So we can reliably teach somebody how to lucid dream, and we can reliably put somebody into lucid dreaming just literally by having a set of goggles on their head that has a specific program in it, and it hits them at a particular time, and we can pop them right in.
My understanding is that if you take control of the dream, and then you start going to the gym and in your dreams and lift weights, you'll actually build muscle. Is that true?
So it depends. So number one, building muscle takes time. So you'd have to go to the gym every night in your dream in order to honestly see any real major effect. But what we do see as an example, when we wake somebody up who's been in a lucid dream, who we said go to the gym, we do see heart rate elevations. We do see muscle contractions. And so, well, I can't speak to whether or not we actually build muscle. What I can tell you is fast twitch muscle fibers definitely start firing off when that person is lucid dreaming and dreaming that they are doing something physical. So we do know that that does happen. But remember, there is a part of REM sleep called atonia. This is a mechanism that prevents you from actually acting out your dreams. This is a very important mechanism because safety becomes a massive issue, right? Because if you're acting out your dreams and you're in bed and you're trying to lift weights, and all of a sudden you take your partner and you lift your partner over your head and toss them because you think you're tossing a weight bag, that can be a big issue. Also, on the more medical side of things, there is something called REM behavior disorder. This is a situation where that paralytic mechanism, or that mechanism that stops you from moving, no longer works, and you do act out your dreams. There have been several people. I mean, this is not I should say it's uncommon, but it's not unreasonable to see it in a population. I've probably, and when I was working in my different practices, I've probably seen it maybe half a dozen to a dozen times throughout my career. And it's quite fascinating. It is also a precursor for Parkinson's syndrome. So if you are having a lucid dream and somebody says you jumped up out of bed and you were doing the thing that was in your lucid dream, you probably want to talk to a sleep specialist, because while your muscles might twitch and have small movements, the actual physical movement of getting up and moving around could be a sign of something else going on.
What about on the opposite end of the spectrum? If someone is having sleep paralysis, they can't do anything while they're getting tormented by some negative entity and they're like terrified out of their minds.
So sleep paralysis is a well-known physiological phenomenon. We see it all the time, and it has mostly to do with sleep deprivation. Many people say, oh, my body was paralyzed and there was a demon that was taking over my body, or they say that it was a spiritual experience. I want to be super duper clear. I'm not a spiritual expert in any way, shape, or form, but I can tell you what happens on the medicine side of things. So remember how we just talked about that paralytic mechanism where your brain is in paralysis, you don't move? That is what happens during sleep paralysis. So what happens is your body wakes up very, very quickly for some unknown reason, and your body's still stuck in REM sleep. And so while your eyes can open, almost nothing else works except for your eyes and your lungs. Now, to be fair, most people get terrified of this situation. Many, many people that I've interviewed have said to me, I thought I woke up dead, right? So it was like my body died, my brain just hadn't clicked off. I only had a couple of seconds left and I couldn't move. You can't speak, and it's very terrifying. So I want to be very clear about this. This is a physiological phenomenon, and 90% of the time, it's due to sleep deprivation. So if you are sleep deprived, if you're not getting good quality sleep or good quantity sleep, you will have this. And by the way, it is normal for everybody out there to experience this 1 to 3 to 5 times in their lifetime. And if you look back, what you'll notice is it probably happened on a night where you had a lot of alcohol, or you had stayed up really late, or something along those lines. The other 10% actually fall into a category within a sleep disorder called narcolepsy. So narcolepsy has what's called the narcoleptic triad, which is 3 different symptoms we use, any one of which we can use to identify somebody as having narcolepsy. That are hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. So as we're falling asleep and as we wake up, we see things that aren't really there. That also, by the way, can be in combination with sleep paralysis and look really funky and weird. There's the sleep paralysis itself, and then there's something called cataplexy. Cataplexy is a very weird situation where when somebody expresses emotion like laughter, anger, surprise, the atonia kicks in and they drop like a stone and they fall to the ground, or they become unsteady and they have to hold on to a desk, or they drop their coffee cup. This is very common in narcoleptics. And to be fair, it's quite sad because when I work with narcoleptics, one of the first things I ask them is I say, do you laugh at jokes? And they say, oh no, I can't laugh. If I laugh, I fall over and then everybody laughs at me. So can you imagine, Stephan, you can't laugh at a joke? Can you imagine how depressing that would be for a life? You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't watch a comedy without literally falling to the floor and having a problem. And to be fair, there's severities. There's people who've got it lighter and people who've got it more severe. But like, when looking at the whole thing, there's a lot there. So I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer to sleep paralysis, but it's pretty involved. And so if you're experiencing sleep paralysis, step number one, sleep more. Increase the quantity of sleep. If you're still experiencing it, improve the quality. Lower your caffeine, lower your alcohol, get rid of cannabis, see how it's affecting your overall sleep. Number three, if it's still happening, go see a sleep specialist to make sure you don't have narcolepsy.
Gotcha. Have you had any episodes where you had sleep paralysis and you couldn't, like, it was really disturbing, maybe terrifying even, nightmare dream you were in?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, my wife had reported to me, and this has been since we've been married, that I was almost face down and she could hear me moaning or trying to cry out to her to wake me up because there was something that I was not happy about going on in my dream while I was sleep paralyzed. So yes, it has definitely occurred to me before. And again, I can tell you exactly why it occurred. I had not slept well for multiple nights in a row. I was like kind of sleep deprived, and I'd had alcohol that evening. And guess what? Newsflash, Michael, you're human too. And those kind of things can happen. So yeah, I've experienced the terrible side of it. But here's the thing to remember, and I'm fortunate because I'm a sleep doctor, is it goes away. Like 60 seconds, which feels like 55 minutes, is literally about the longest, maybe 90 seconds if you're really deep in sleep, but it goes away for sure.
Do you believe that negative entities can interfere with us and give us nightmares or kind of torment us in our sleep state?
So it's an interesting question, and it's not a question that I haven't fielded before. And so a lot of people, when we look at the dream state, we think of it, some people will think of it as a portal, right? As a portal to a completely different, to your unconscious, but also to a completely different kind of plane of existence. Here's what I can tell you is I think there's something there. I don't think we're good at measuring it and metricing it. So it's very difficult. I'm a scientist, but I also understand that there's things that science isn't good at measuring yet because we haven't figured out the tools to measure yet. So I think that could definitely fall into that category. It would make intuitive sense because so many people report certain things that make you think there has to be something else going on there. A great example of that is when people see people that have died in their dreams, and they have entire conversations with these people, and information is relayed to these people, and then that information has a very positive effect or helps somebody in the waking world.
The treasure is buried in the backyard by the oak tree.
Right. The Cougarans are in the safe under the floorboards, right? That kind of stuff would be wonderful. But I think that I would hate to say, I don't want to be closed-minded and say, hey, I'm a scientist and we can't prove that shit, so I don't believe it. But what I can tell you is there are a lot of people that believe it, and there's a lot of unknown aspects to what's going on with our conscious mind in sleep. I personally think that it could be a doorway. It could be a portal. But we're going to have to learn a lot more about how our brain reacts during that period of time. And I will also tell you, there's almost nobody who's researching this on a pure science level to try to understand that as well as could be understood. I had a very interesting conversation one year with Michael Beckworth, if you're familiar with him. And he is he is the astral plane all, every single time he goes to sleep. He's like, boom, he's there. And that's kind of his methodology for getting there. And so I think there's something, I just can't quite put my finger on exactly what.
Okay. Have you had any experiences where loved ones who have passed visit you in your dreams?
I have not had those experiences in particular, but actually, in the forward of my book, Energize, I talk about uh, I don't know how to call it. I guess a out of body experience that I had. I had a cardiac event in the middle of a restaurant, and I was unconscious for a significant period of time. And I saw some stuff I wasn't, I mean, I don't know if that was my brain shutting down, my brain turning on, but I've had some experiences that I can't explain. And so I find it interesting. And it's definitely an area that if I could learn more, I think I would. I'm open to the idea for sure. But there's most people that are in my position are hard science guys and gals. And it's like, if I can't measure it, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a problematic place to be. Speaking from experience, because I was studying for a PhD in biochemistry. I have a master's. I dropped out of the PhD. Hardcore scientist, agnostic. I was lost up until age 42. I really was. I just didn't know it. And then I had an awakening experience in India on a Tony Robbins Platinum Partner trip, where a monk touched me on the head, and it was a psychedelic trip. I'd never done any kind of drugs, but everything was technicolor, as if somebody is describing what a LSD trip is like. And I felt this deep sense of peace and connection to God, to all that is, and it changed my life. And all these miracles started happening. It's been amazing. And then I had another big milestone in my spiritual evolution on January 22nd of 2021, where I prayed in the middle of the night for a job inspired by a past guest, Sheila Gillette. And she's a famous psychic, and she was on her deathbed in 1969 praying for a job. She had a pulmonary embolism as a complication from childbirth. And yeah, so she was miraculously saved, to the astonishment of all the doctors, and then her psychic abilities came online. So I didn't know what I was asking for exactly. In retrospect, you can connect the dots afterwards, but not really before. I, for one, didn't want to have a near-death experience in order to get the job. So that was kind of implied. Secondly, I didn't know that it involved psychic abilities. So now I have all these amazing psychic abilities, and I have visions and prophetic dreams and all sorts of things that if you had told me about this back when I was agnostic and I was all into the science and nothing else, I would have said you've been smoking something.
So to kind of put a bow on that, I think that happens to people, right? I think that that's something to be honored and respected, and try to understand if understanding is actually what you're supposed to do with that, or there's some other calling for it, right? So, like, at the end of the day, I think that we don't know, but I think what goes on on the outside of our brain is really only one realm, if you will. I think there's a whole nother thing that's going on. And it's not like we have to be connected to the matrix and a wire pulled out of the back of our head and all that insanity, right? There's a connection, I think, that people can reach through this idea of a portal. And I mean, if you look at the data, you can have people all having very similar dreams at the same time. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff that can go on out there. So again, I think it's fascinating. I love hearing about your experience. I think that's super interesting. And I'd be interested to know, like, how have you slept since then? Like, do you sleep better? Do you sleep worse? Because what happens for some people who gain this, what we call a gift at times, is it can be disruptive. It can be too much. There can be so much information that's coming through that it's difficult to protect themselves or to be able to slow things down, because it's such a rush, almost like a fire hose type of thing. How have you been able to handle it, and how did you sleep afterwards?
I sleep quite well. I used to. So this has been a process, right? A process of discovery and trying to get a handle on my abilities and what's coming in, and protecting my energetic boundaries and stuff. So I would get interfered with pretty much every Tuesday. Something about Tuesday night, they were just like on me like a fly on you know what. And that thankfully has stopped. I do put energetic protection around me before I go to sleep, and it does help. I do know if I've been interfered with over the course of the night, I'll get this little flash of something that doesn't look of the light when I'm waking up, like, and then I test, like a muscle test, or ask and just hear and with clear audience whether I've been something negative is attached to me, and I get mentorship from. I know this probably sounds crazy to you because we haven't talked lately, but I get mentoring from multiple psychics and medical intuitives and Reiki masters and so forth. And one of my mentors, Tina Zion, who was a guest on this show, and she's amazing, such a beautiful soul. She taught me how to remove negative entities by calling in angels, divine and sacred beings to get rid of them. And now I learn, so I'm also getting stuff from above. And you probably think, okay, now it's getting really out there. So I'm getting taught things, techniques and things, and distinctions that really make a difference to my ability to protect myself. And so I'll just like blast out from the center of my kind of solar plexus.
Do you learn, like, is the download occurring into your brain while you sleep, or does it happen while you meditate?
Both. It's more all day long because I'm in constant conversation and receiving stuff. And a lot of times it'll just come as a complete knowing, like a whole package, right? It's like a terabyte of data just boop, all at once. And then there are times where I can hear it in my inner voice. And then then I've also done what's called automatic writing, where my hand gets taken over and I'm writing in cursive and not my own handwriting, and words that or names that I've never heard before. And then I go online and Google it, and turns out that these are actual people who I'm supposed to be in contact with.
It sounds like a lot going on there. So, for folks who are out there listening and kind of thinking through this whole idea of optimization, sleep, spirituality, and kind of bringing a lot of those factors in, to kind of get them together, I think it's safe to say that you can receive these types of messages in many unique ways, right? But one thing that a lot of people can do is remember their dreams. And so, one of the things I tell people all the time is if you want to try to feel a little bit more of a connection to that part of you, then you could start a dream diary, right? Very simple, and all you do is when you wake up in the morning, just write down what's inside your head. Just very gently, don't go crazy, don't be thinking what's going on inside my head right now. Just write down until you don't feel like writing anymore. Close the book, go about your day.
So here's a little distinction that I think is really helpful, but I wonder if there's science to back this up. Seems like if you move your head, or you're kind of moving your body around, then the dream memory just kind of goes much faster. So if you have the dream journal right next to your bed and you try not to move around too much, then you're able to keep it in your head longer to retain that memory to write it down. Is that true?
So what happens is that if your executive function takes over, right? So I have to sit up, I have to go find my phone, I have to find a piece of paper, I have to do this. All that executive function pushes that memory further and further away from actually solidifying and getting locked in. Because the thing is you lock in dreams, you lock in memories during REM sleep, which you are now coming right out of, right? And so it's hard to lock this in. So you're correct in that if you start to do a whole bunch of things. I have one client, they have a voice recorder on their, like literally right next to them. It's a one button thing. They're not searching on their phone for an app, any of that crap. They just have it right here. They grab it, their fingers on it, and they just go click, blah, 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 blah. And they talk about everything in their head till there's nothing left in their head. Then they unclick, and then it gets transcribed, and then they can review it and start to learn more and start to kind of understand what's happening over the course of time. But yeah, you're correct.
I want to get your take on this. Oh, and by the way, one thing I learned from a webinar I attended, and I can just sense when I'm being guided to something. And this was something I was totally guided to. And Karen Noe is a famous psychic, and I attended her webinar on how to receive messages from loved ones and from angels. And I was in Israel at the time, so it was quite late, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, something like that. I was attending the webinar. And one of the things that really stuck for me after or from the content of her webinar was to ask for a dream and to ask also to be woken up from it so you'll remember it. And I did that night. I asked one of my guides, one of my spirit guides, to give me a dream and to wake me up from it. And I'll never forget that dream for the rest of my life. That was the the most heavenly upper world kind of in the higher dimensions kind of dream I've ever had. And it was also prophetic. So it's coming to it hasn't come to pass yet, but I know it will. And it had this ethereal sort of quality to it. It was like if you could have the most delicate, intricate tapestry in an energetic form overlaid onto your dream, it was like that. And I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but that's the only thing I can kind of think of as a way to describe it as different from every other dream I've ever had. I haven't had a dream like that since, but I haven't been asking for dreams like that since. I've just been asking for occasional visits from loved ones and so forth, or like my cat, who um, passed in 2016. So I had an incredible visit with her in the astral realm during my sleep, and it was absolutely so real. It felt as real as this physical reality, if not more so. It was incredible. It was like a reunion, and I love exploring these different metaphysical, spiritual aspects of the dream state and the sleep state because we are there so much, so many hours of the day, of the night, every night. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what your take is on what I just said.
Well, so I would argue from a science perspective, the reason that that was such an important dream to you about your cat is because you had tremendous history with your cat. Your cat had tremendous emotional meaning to you. So when you are asking for something like that to be back into your life, meaning into your brain, right, into your thoughts, then you're recalling from an area of your brain that's deep inside your brain, that's deep with emotion. You had tremendous love for that animal, I'm assuming. And so when that occurred, you're accessing a part of your brain that's like, heck yeah, I haven't accessed this in a long time. This is awesome. And then you get more involved in it and things like that. So as an example, you didn't say, hey, I'm going to ask for some random stranger to come up and talk to me, right? You didn't. And nobody ever does, right? People ask for things that are very emotionally valent or have an emotional tie to them. And I think that's kind of a bit of the key that starts the engine for that level of connection, right? Because if you just said, hey, I just want to have a nice, happy dream, you'd probably have one, but you probably wouldn't remember it. But if you said, I want to have a nice, happy dream, and my Aunt Bessie, who's passed away, and my mom, who's no longer with us, I want her in the dream, you're going to remember that because, again, you got a high emotional valence to those particular people. And when they show up in your dream, that's also, by the way, an encoding process. And so you're also, I would argue, with your emotion is being encoded and processed through that once again to allow for that feeling of, wow, this is really here. This is super vivid. Not to take anything away from the metaphysical standpoint of it.
So what happens if there is no kind of emotional juice like that? It just feels like information. Like I was shown, this is more, I would call this more of a vision than a dream. It was like a still environment. There was nobody in the room. It was this beautiful kind of, had this museum quality to it. It looked like it was from a different era, and it had such intricacy to it, ultra high definition, like I was in an IMAX movie, 360-degree vision of ultra high def. And I remember opening my eyes. I was laying in bed, and opening my eyes, and I saw the background of the room, including the sliding glass door and everything. And I could see still that image of where I was, in the astral realm or whatever was being projected to me. I could still see it overlaid over the background of the room, and it slowly faded away. And it was not after image colors that were inversed. It was the correct colors of that room overlaid, and it was small, like this, kind of. So I saw more of the background of the room, and it slowly faded away. And I had no connection to that room in terms of recognition. Oh yeah, I've been in that place before, or I know where it is, or anything like that. There was nobody in there. There were some musical instruments in there.
This is during you were awake, right? This wasn't during sleep.
Yeah, that was like on the verge of sleep awakeness in the morning. I felt like I was not asleep, and that was not a dream state, but it was like a vision instead of a dream.
Right. And so very common scenario. Lots of people kind of see things, especially as they're waking up. Depends upon the environment. Like if you had been asleep and then woke up from said environment. Again, on the science side of things, not the spirituality. I'm not saying anything negative against that. There's definitely a place for that. But if I'm just going to talk on the science side of things, we would call that a hypnopompic hallucination. So as you're waking up, you see things that may or may not really be there. That would be somewhat what you described. Now, again, it had a particular meaning to you, and so it had worth to you. And so, if it was just a color or a sound, you might not have focused in on it. But because it wasn't, and you focused in on it, you can continue that movie, if you will, in your head. Again, the brain is an incredibly powerful thing. There's lots of things that it can do, especially when you're in that kind of a state. If I had to argue a point one way or another, I would say that you're in a post-sleep trans-hypnotic state. So you're not quite awake, you're not quite asleep, but you're sort of in a trance, if you will, like when doing hypnosis. I don't know, I can't remember. Have you ever done hypnosis before?
Yep, including past life regression hypnosis too. Yeah.
So, as people kind of walk you into that hypnotic state and they're kind of talking you in, and just within the first 15 or so minutes of that hypnotic state, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of information that's coming in. And so that reminds me of that overlay situation that you were talking about, right? Is I've got that one thing there. I'm kind of in a post-hypnotic trance state. So that's going to stay. But over the course of time, that might fade as my executive function starts to come online, as I choose for it to do so. Again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that you didn't have a regression to a past life. I'm not saying that it didn't mean something. I'm not saying it wasn't influential. I'm just trying to explain it if I was going to try from a science perspective.
Yeah, you're such a nerd.
Yes, I am.
I am too, but I've got kind of the other side of me I'm exploring to a much greater depth these days, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, and let's be fair, Stephan, like that's a hell of a lot more interesting. I mean, the science is the science. Like I'm not saying that we don't learn new interesting stuff as things are going on, but I think people should embrace these ideas, and I think a lot of them don't. I think a lot of them just say, "Oh, it's just a dream, doesn't mean anything." I'm not convinced that's true either. I think that people need to honor sort of the ideas that are floating around in your dream state, and start to understand why they are there. Now, sometimes, again, it's just straight up emotional processing. Got into a fight with my wife, my kid is pissing me off, so I had a bad dream. I get those things, but when you see a theme coming up across, or there's another kind of dream which we haven't discussed, which is called a stress dream, right? So I have a very, very particular stress dream. So my dream is I all of a sudden I come to and I'm in high school. The bell rings and I run to my locker to get my books for the next class.
Wait, and you're not wearing pants?
No, I'm fully clothed. But I show up at my locker and it's one of those combination lockers, and I'm spinning the dial and I can't remember the combination. For the life of me, I can't remember the combination. That dream I have every single time there's something really stressful going on in my life. So as an example, I know if I have that dream, full bore stop, something is going on with me, either emotionally, spiritually, physically, and I need to really kind of check in with myself and understand that level of stress and do something about it. So for some people who have repetitive dreams, in some cases that can be an instance of that as well.
Oh, well, here's a tip for you. Instead of writing an X on your on the back of your hand,
Dr.
Write
Daniels.
your locker combination, your lock combination number.
Exactly. Exactly. Then you'll really know then you're in a lucid stress dream, which I think that might suck, right? Like, wouldn't that be awful? Unless you fix
Yeah.
it, I guess. Unless because if I saw the
Yeah,
combination,
then
then
you get in. Yeah,
I'd be good to
exactly.
go.
All right. So, how does our listener or viewer learn more from you? You're such a fascinating guy. Where should they go to work with you or sign up for your courses or what have you?
Absolutely. So I have a very easy website to remember, thesleepdoctor.com. I don't think anybody out there is going to forget that one. Also, I have the same handle on all my social media. So TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. We put out a tremendous amount of sleep tips, sleep facts, and we put different ones out in different venues. So what you see on Twitter is not what you're going to see on TikTok. And so whatever your social media platform is, if you participate in such a thing, you can catch me over there. And if social media is not your thing, I have really, I feel, done a great job of giving science-backed information about sleep and dreams on the website. And so everything that you could want to look at, and it's all referenced from a science perspective, you're going to see there. Plus, to be fair, we've thrown in a tremendous number of mattress reviews. I got to be honest with you. If you don't have good sleep equipment, you don't sleep well, right? And so I believe that sleep is a performance activity, a lot like running, right? So if you're a runner and you go for a run in flip-flops and torn cutoffs with a boombox on your arm, your time's not going to be too good, right? But if you got your ASICs, your dry fit wear, your AirPods in, you can click off a 730 mile, probably no problem. Well, equipment matters, and equipment really matters in sleep. And so finding the right mattress, pillow, sheets to create that sleep system can actually have a big effect.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. And listener, try something new. Like from this episode, pick something that you're going to do, try it for a week. For example, ask a loved one who's passed to show up in a dream and to wake you up so you remember it, or try one of these sleep hacks like banana tea and see what it does for you and the quality of your life. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.